Welcome to the MichalWelch Podcast with the college basketball preseason AP 25 poll dropping today. Let's recap the 2021-22 season a little bit. I've got my top 25 for you, and we'll tackle 10 teams that'll be most exciting to flip on your television screen to keep an eye on. Thanks for pressing play. Here we go.
All my blessings, all my blessings, all my blessings, all my blessings. All my blessings, all my blessings, all my blessings, all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny, daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beat.
To recap briefly, the last time you had a college basketball game on, you were watching number 1 seed Kansas beat number 8 seed North Carolina 72-69 in New Orleans in what was really an improbable run. Certainly not for the Jayhawks, but it was only the second title for Bill Self, despite all the time that he spent there, his 19 years at Kansas, and the number of times that they've been involved in the conversation for possibly being in the national championship game. Only his second title there in Rock Chalk Country, and he's playing Hubert Davis, the new tapped head coach for North Carolina, after Roy Williams shockingly retired and was decided he no longer wanted to coach there in Tar Heel City. So it was a little bit of a shocker in that regard. In an excellent game, looked like it was definitely going Kansas's way early, and North Carolina, as they did all tournament, was managed to pull back into that game. The line was originally Kansas ways 4 points, and just a good basketball game all the way around. Badcock there. Armani Badcock had 15 points and 15 rebounds, one of the top offensive rebounders in the country, the ACC Conference Player of the Year. Brady Manick, who has moved on to the NBA, 13 rebounds and 13 points. Caleb Love had 13 points as well. RJ Davis, 13 points, 12 rebounds for North Carolina, rotation that only went 6 deep. Kansas was about the same at 6, 7, 8 guys in the game. But McCormick, 15 points, 10 rebounds. Abaji, who was a lottery pick, 12 points, and just a great game all the way around there. So, going back and reviewing the season as a whole, it wasn't super shocking, but Gonzaga, UCLA, Kansas, Villanova, Texas, Michigan, Purdue, Baylor, Duke, and Kentucky were the top 10 preseason AP teams going into last year. Now, Gonzaga, if you remember, had Drew Timme coming back, and they had Chet Holmgren, the top 7-foot recruit as well. Now, they finished 28-4. They never fell out of the top 5. They finished number 1 in the final AP poll, which is released prior to the postseason tournaments. That's prior to the conference tournaments. Actually, this is the West Coast that Gonzaga plays in, so they play like a full week earlier. So this comes out, so the week before that they play their conference games. So this is before the postseason tournaments, but once we have those results in, we can kind of slot in who we think is better than who, obviously, since we have playoffs there. But with the final AP poll, which comes at the end of the regular season, Gonzaga, who started number 1, did finish number 1, and that's kind of what I'm going to use to kind of guide through a few of the teams here. So they won the regular West Coast and conference tournament titles, entered the NCAA tournament as a number 1 seed, where they lost in the Sweet 16 to number 4 seed Arkansas. Drew Timme, or Timmy, depending on how you wish to pronounce it, Chet Holmgren, Andrew Newpart, Julian Strother, and Rasan Bolton all averaged double figures for what was a really good team that just got stuck down a couple baskets late in the Arkansas game in the NCAA tournament and just couldn't quite get ahead there and lost by just a handful of points, and just a shocking loss to lose in the Sweet 16. The number 2 preseason team, UCLA, finished 27-8, 15-5 in the Pac-12. That was good for second place in that conference. Again, coming off the first 4 win in 2020, where they went on a nice roll there. They dropped to number 17th at their lowest point, but didn't fall out of the top 25 at all. They didn't win the Pac-12. Tommy Tupperville, the longtime assistant at Gonzaga, popped on over and grabbed the Arizona job, and the Wildcats were immediately ripping through the conference there. So UCLA, they finished 11th and were knocked out of the Sweet 16 as a number 4 seed by 8-seeded North Carolina. Jimmy Juzang, Jamie Jacquez, Tiger Campbell were all part of that squad as well. Campbell is still back this season, and that was still a really good team, but they did not win the Pac-12 or make a big run through the NCAA tournament. Kansas started third, finished third, 32-6. They're 14-4 and first in the Big 12. The Jayhawks didn't drop out of the top 10 the entire season. They tied the Big 12 regular season with Baylor. They won the Big 12 conference tournament, and they won the national championship, of course, and sent several guys on to the NBA. Number 4 was Villanova, 30-8 overall, 16-4 second in the Big East. Now, Jay Wright surprisingly retired in the offseason, but it was rough during the season as well. Nova nearly dropped out of the top 25 altogether at one point, but clawed all the way back to finish at 5th, right around where they started. They won the Big East tournament, were led by Colin Gillespie, who will be missed as he moved on in the offseason to the NBA. And the number 2 option, Justin Moore, went down during the season with an ACL tear, so it really hurt the Wildcats. Number 5 in the preseason poll was Texas, who was welcoming in Chris Beard in his first season after coming over from Texas Tech. They finished 22-12. They were 10-8 and finished 4th in the Big 12. Now, they did fall all the way down to 25 to finish the season. They lost as a 6th seed to number 3 seed Purdue in the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament, so things didn't quite go as planned there in his very first season, and he only had one freshman on the squad, brought in a bunch of transfers. Things just didn't quite work out. They should be better this year. Number 6 was Michigan, and this was a team that struggled. They were 19-15 to end the year. They were 7th in the Big Ten. They struggled with young point guards. They had lots of turnover issues. They finished outside of the top 25 by November, but made a run through the NCAA tournament. They did make it in as an 11 seed, and they made it all the way to the Sweet 16, where they eventually lost to number 2 seed Villanova. Hunter Dickinson was a big piece that kept that team going, and he will return this season. Number 7 was Purdue, another Big Ten team right there. They were 14-6 and 3rd in the Big Ten. They finished 29-8 overall. The Boilermakers finished at the lowest ranking of 10th in any poll. They didn't drop out of the top 10. Jaden Ivey running the point, of course. They have the twin tower centers of Zach Edey and Travion Williams rotating in there to help on offense and defense. That was a great team. Baylor was number 8. They were 27-7. 14-4 in conference play and first in the Big 12. The Bears also did not fall out of the top 10. They finished 4th and tied with Kansas for the Big 12 regular season title. They made the tournament as a number 1 seed despite a number of injury problems and lost in the second round to a very good North Carolina team, as we all know. The last 2 in the preseason, the original preseason top 10, are Blue Bloods. Number 9, Duke, was 32-7 overall, 16-4. That's first in ACC play. They actually finished 9th as well and never dropped lower than that number on the Coach K tour, as we knew he was going to retire prior to the season after watching Roy Williams do the same. They won the ACC regular season behind Paolo Banchero, Wendell Moore, Mark Williams, Trevor Neals, AJ Griffin. Virginia Tech actually won that ACC conference tournament kind of out of nowhere. But Duke had a big problem when they were getting ready for their final game of the year, a home game to celebrate Coach K, and North Carolina came in there and whooped them, essentially losing his last home game and his last regular season game at home to his heated rival. But it didn't stop there, because this team now had national title hopes, and they were going into the NCAA tournament as a 2 seed. They made it all the way to the Final Four, where they played 8 seed UNC again, the first time the 2 rivals had played in the NCAA tournament at all. And this time, UNC won by 4 points, 81-77, ending Coach K's career, meaning that he lost twice, his last 2 losses to his rival team, which is a terrible way to end a career spanning 5 decades, to lose to your rival twice. Your final home game, your final regular season game, your tournament run. It's just a real mashing your face into the dirt moment for Coach K. Kentucky was welcoming back a player in Oscar Tshiebwe, who stated he wanted to get 20 rebounds per game in preseason conversations. He actually averaged over 15 rebounds per game and finished as the player of the year. The Kentucky Wildcats finished 26-8. They're 14-4 in conference play, second in the SEC. They had struggles. They ultimately finished above where they started at number 8, but they certainly had lots of problems. They were actually punched out as the number 2 seed, as we all remember, in the tournament by St. Peter's. The Peacocks won in overtime, 85-79. Oscar Tshiebwe was the only guy who showed up to the game for the Kentucky Wildcats. The Peacocks went on to beat number 7 seeded Murray State and number 3 seeded Purdue before losing in the Elite Eight to North Carolina, 69-49. Guards Daryl Banks and Mustache Man Doug Eddert off the bench were the two engines behind this team. Coach Shaheen Holloway took the Seton Hall opening at the end of the year, his alma mater, so he was able to turn that into a great coaching opportunity as well. Now, the rest of the top 25 preseason teams, we had number 11 Illinois. They finished 23-10. They finished first in the Big Ten, 15-5 in conference play. They returned Coffee Cockburn. They, won the Big Ten. He was still excellent. They did fall out of the polls for a bit. They finished 19th. They had a 1-point win over Chattanooga in the first round of the tournament, ultimately lost to Houston in a 4-5 matchup in the second round. 12 was Memphis. They were 22-11 in the season, 15-5. That was good for third in American Conference play. Jalen Duren and Imani Bates were the two big recruits that came in to mixed results. Imani Bates certainly had his issues and has since transferred to Eastern Michigan. They fell out of the polls early. They never returned, but pushed Gonzaga in the second round of the NCAA tournament as an 8 seed before they were knocked out. Number 13 was Oregon, and this is the first team that really bottomed out. Michigan and Memphis had their struggles, but the Ducks didn't make the NCAA tournament, weren't a force in the conference at all. They were 6-6 early with bad losses to Arizona State and Stanford in conference play. They finished 18-12. They did make the NIT where they made a run to the finals, but lost to Texas A&M. So the dunking wasn't as bad as it could have been, but it wasn't good at all. Number 14, Alabama. Here's another bad one. They were 19-14, fifth in the SEC. They finished unranked, no postseason. They like to shoot a lot of threes, and they didn't hit a whole lot of them. Number 15, Houston, 32-6 overall. 15-3 was good for first in American Conference play. They lost in the Elite Eight. They made the tournament as a 5 seed, and then eventually lost to Villanova, the 2nd seed there. Now, this was a team that lost multiple players due to injury, but was still able to advance, including a big win over the number 1 seed there, Arizona, where they had completely different styles of play. Houston won behind that great defense and slowing things down, and Arizona, one of the quickest up-tempo offenses in the country, but Houston able to pull a big upset there and make a run. They'll be one of the top teams again this year, bringing those guys back from injury. 16 in the preseason poll was Arkansas. The Razorbacks dropped out, then popped back in to finish 17th, just a spot behind where they were ranked originally. They were 28-9. 13-5 was good for fourth in SEC play. They made a second Sweet 16 run, the second year in a row they'd done it. They got the big win over the number 1 seed in the bracket, Gonzaga, but did lose to Duke for a Final Four spot. Number 17 was Ohio State, which had several questions for a couple years now. They did win a game in the tournament as a number 7 seed before ultimately bowing out to Villanova. They were 20-12 on the season, 4th in the Big Ten at 12-8 in conference play, but finished unranked. E.J. Liddell averaged almost 20 points and 8 rebounds per game to lead that squad. He is gone this season, but there are a bunch of top freshmen coming in, so it will be a completely different look this year. Number 18, Tennessee. The Vols shifted around the polls and eventually vaulted forward to finish 5th at 27-8. They're 2nd in the SEC at 14-4. They won the SEC tournament, made the NCAA tournament as a 3 seed, and lost in the second round to Michigan. But this was a very good ball club, and what was a feisty top there that involved Auburn that we'll get to in a second as well. Number 19 was this Carolina Tar Heels team. They struggled under rookie head coach Herbert Davis and immediately fell out of the rankings. They re-entered for a week at number 25 and then finished unranked. So they were largely off the national radar for a long time. They were 29-10. They finished 15-5 and second in ACC conference play, where they eventually made the NCAA tournament as an 8 seed. And there's a lot of talk now about how, yes, North Carolina was getting better and they were evolving, and we knew that they were going to be a good team getting in the NCAA tournament. And they did make it as an 8 seed, partially because they had the big win to end the regular season over Duke. But again, they lost in the ACC tournament, where Virginia Tech was a surprising winner there. And you can't really say that you knew that they were going to go on a hot run, because they didn't have a lot of high-profile wins. Hubert Davis had struggled, and it was just not a surefire thing. So that is not true. Anyways, as we all know now, they won the round 2 game against Baylor, coming back from 20 points down after Brady Manick was ejected to win that game in overtime in an all-timer. So they certainly had that stapled into their resume run. They went all the way to play Kansas in the national championship game, where they ultimately lost by 3. So their resume here, lining up, was a 30-point mashing of Marquette in the first round, followed by the big comeback win over number 1 seeded Baylor in overtime in the second round. Then they beat UCLA in the Sweet 16, again, a team that had a lot of ambition there. Then they beat the great St. Peter's team to make it to the Final Four, where they beat Duke, and then finally the great national championship game against Kansas. So although they lost, they are very much woven into the fabric of what was a great season here. Coach K's final year, and they beat the Dukies twice. Kansas and Bill Self getting his second championship, the great St. Peter's story, Baylor's great run here, and UCLA's brief spotlight here, which will hopefully extend as they're rebuilding that brand on the football field and basketball field. So the Tar Heels really a great story in last year's season. The last group here, number 20, Florida State, number 21, Maryland, number 23, St. Bonaventure, who was coming off a great 2020 year, and number 25, Virginia. All those teams fell out within the first couple weeks and never made it back into the top 25 poll. They certainly all struggled last season. Number 22, Auburn, they were 28-6. They finished 15-3 in conference play. That was good for first place in the SEC. Now, they made it up to the number 1 spot for 2 weeks and never fell out of the polls altogether. They finished 8th. Jabari Smith, of course, the superstar freshman there. 3 other sophomores were the key pieces there. So just a young team. They were blown out as a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament by Miami, who made a run of their own and made their first Elite 8 performance as a school, which is a little shocking. But Auburn, a great regular season showing, and just couldn't get it done in the NCAA tournament. And finally, UConn was 24th in the original poll. They finished 21st. They were 23-10 overall, 13-6 in the Big East, which was 3rd, and they ultimately fell in the first round of the NCAA tournament. They were upset by New Mexico State in a 5-12 matchup. That was a team I didn't actually get to watch a whole lot of, but a solid group there in a competitive Big East last season. That means that 10 teams were different between the preseason AP poll and the final AP poll that came out just prior to all the tournament action, which kind of helped settle which teams looked good by the end of the year. But Arizona went from unranked and projected to possibly finish in the bottom third of the Pac-12 to second in the final AP poll. They won the Pac-12 regular season and tournament and were a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, but lost to Houston in a battle of those contrasting styles. They finished the season 33-4, with Benedict Mathurin leading one of the top offenses in the country. Of course, the new coach there, Tommy Tuberville, coming in after being an assistant there at Gonzaga for so many years. Now, the new additions in the final AP poll were number 12, Texas Tech, a great defensive style there and a new head coach. Number 13, Providence in the embattled Big East. Number 14, Wisconsin, another good squad over there. Number 16, Iowa, led by Keegan Murray, the top player, one of the top players in the entire country, according to a lot of different metrics. They won the Big Ten tournament, but lost in a 5-12 upset match to Richmond in the first round there. Keegan Murray might have had a bit of a tweaked ankle, and they could not hit any shots. Number 18 was St. Mary's out of the West Coast Conference, the same place that Gonzaga plays out of, along with BYU, another quality team out of there. Number 20 was Murray State. Number 22 was USC. 23 was Boise State, and 24 was Colorado State, both out of the Mountain West. Those are the other new entries. Boise State was ranked for the first time all season on the final AP poll. Now, Texas Tech and Providence made it to the Sweet 16. Wisconsin, St. Mary's, and Murray State all won a game in the NCAA tournament. Boise State won the competitive Mountain West outright and won the conference tournament, but lost to Memphis in the opening round. So those are your highlights from those teams as we got towards the end of the season. There were 11 other schools that were in and out of the polls that did not start or finish there. Marquette, Seton Hall, Xavier, all Big East teams there. Davidson had a good streak. BYU, Loyola Chicago, LSU, Wyoming out of the Mountain West, Iowa State, Florida. Michigan State was in there for extended period as well. So a handful of teams getting in to the poll for an extended period too. Our award winners, Oscar Tshiebwe, of course, won the Naismith Award for Player of the Year. He was the AP Player of the Year. Freshman of the Year was Jabari Smith from Auburn. Walker Kessler out of Auburn was the Defensive Player of the Year. Sports Person of the Year, Oscar Tshiebwe. He just cleaned up all over the place. NCAA Tournament Most Outstanding Player was actually Achi Abaji from Kansas, the Kansas guard there. And the NIT Most Valuable Player was Colby Jones out of Xavier, as they did make a good run through that section. Texas A&M won the NIT. The first team All-American group was Johnny Davis out of Wisconsin, Keegan Murray out of Iowa, Coffee Cockburn out of Illinois, Achi Abaji out of Kansas, and Oscar Tshiebwe out of Kentucky. The only one returning this season is Tshiebwe to Kentucky. The second team was Benedict Mathurin out of Arizona, Chet Holmgren, of course, out of Gonzaga, Drew Timme out of Gonzaga. He'll be back again this season. Jabari Smith out of Auburn, Jaden Ivey out of Purdue, and Paolo Banchero out of Duke for what was another really good college basketball season. So this upcoming 2022-23 college basketball season is going to look a lot like Blue Blood season. At number 1, winning the national championship, it's hard to overlook North Carolina, who again last year was 29-10, second in the ACC at 15-5, losing the national championship game to Kansas. They lose Brady Manick, but return the other 4 starters, including ACC Player of the Year Amandu Babcock. Northwestern transfer Pete Nance is coming in. Freshman Jalen Washington will work into the rotation under Hubert Davis. That figures again to be in contention in only his second season. This team was first in the ACC in free throw percentage, third in scoring, and third in the country in rebounding margin. It is worth noting there are 358 Division I basketball schools. It is triple times what Division I football is when reading off statistical categories. That's why it's specific to mention conference sometimes. That's more realistic in evaluating some of these things. Thanks to Babcock being one of the best offensive rebounders in the country, that's how they were able to get the edge. He averaged 16.3 points per game, 13.1 rebounds. Caleb Love at the point also averaged 4.3 rebounds per game as a guard. He had almost 16 points per game as well. They were 300th nationally in turnovers, but hopefully they'll be able to clear that up a bit, as they were close to a national championship there, and they did improve as the year went along. My number 2 team is the Kentucky Wildcats, who were 26-8 last season, second in the SEC. Again, Oscar Tshiebwe won the John Wooden Award for Best College Basketball Player and could be the first one to repeat since Ralph Sampson at Virginia in the 82 through 83 seasons. The Cats lose last season's class of Ty Washington, Kalen Hardy, Kalen Brooks, Devin Mintz, but none of those guys were present during the St. Peter's loss last season, as in they were horrific performers. Only Tshiebwe, the 6'9 beast and senior who averaged 17.4 points per game and 15.1 rebounds was really present in that game. And again, he would like to average 20 boards per game. It could be possible. He didn't just clean up the 2021-22 award season. He was also number 1 in total rebounds, number 1 in offensive rebounds, number 1 in offensive, defensive, and total rebounding percentage. That's available rebounds to grab. Tied for 6th in 2-point field goals made, number 2 in player efficiency rating, number 1 in defensive win shares, number 3 in offensive win shares that made him number 2 overall in win shares, number 2 in win shares per 40 minutes, number 5 in box plus minus, and number 7 in defensive rating. So he was just elite in every measurement that you can imaginable on the floor. He is the identity of the team. Senior Jacob Toppin, who is a brother to OG Toppin, the New York Knick, has an excellent offensive rating, and he should be a starter. Shavin Wheeler is a senior as well. He averaged almost 7 assists to go along with 10 points last year. He'll be a starter. The transfer from Illinois, Antonio Reeves, is a monster 3-point shooter. And of course, there's a class full of new recruits. Chris Livingston, CJ Frederick, they should push a team that has a superstar, senior experience, and freshman ability studs to really push this team to win a championship. My number 3 is Gonzaga, who will be right there with North Carolina and Kentucky. Now, they lost Andrew Nembhard, who was the 31st pick in the draft. He went to the Pacers. He was the number 1 second rounder and might have the biggest contract ever for a second rounder. The team was number 1 nationally in shooting percentage, 4th in rebounding margin, 3rd in assists nationally last season. Nembhard and Chet Holmgren will both be missed greatly, but double-figure scorers are back, including Drew Timme at 18.4 points and 6.8 rebounds per game, and a number of guys who tested the NBA did come back as well, including a number of guards. They grabbed Alfred Reed, a 7-footer out of the LSU Exodus, and Chattanooga's Malachi Smith, a guard from the transfer portal who averaged almost 20 points and 7 rebounds and was the Southern Conference Player of the Year last season. If they can get the pieces to come together, this could be a really, really, really good ball club led by veteran Drew Timme, who was a 2-time first or second team all NCAA player. Just great. The great guards, great youth, and could be a really good special ball club here. My number 4 is Houston, and I don't have as much trust in them as I do the top 3 teams on this list. They have back-to-back 20-win seasons. Marcus Sasser and Tremont Mark are both going to be back after playing less than 20 combined games due to injury last season. Both are expected to be starters this year, and with 4 starters gone last year, it's going to be a different mix. 5-star Jarris Walker is a 6'8 stud, 3 and a 4-star that have recently redshirted that'll be available to infuse into this group. They have Kelvin Sampson grabbed Malik Wilson, a senior guard from Texas Tech, out of the transfer portal. Again, another team that has a number of different pieces to put together, but one of the best coaches in the country. They had a top 10 team in offensive and defensive efficiency last year, top 25 in assists, scoring defense, rebounding margin, and turnover margin. Figures to be a really good ball club again. My number 5 team is Kansas, coming off the national championship. They lost Abaji, Christian Braun, David McCormick, Ramey Martin, Mitchell Lightfoot, but they returned 2 starters and Jalen Wilson, the 6'8 forward who was 3rd team Big 12 last season with over 11 points and 7 rebounds per game. Transfer Kevin McCullough from Texas Tech adds guard depth. He had 10 points and 4 boards per game last season for the Red Raiders. They probably have a freshman point guard with several recruits coming in. Top 5 stars, including Grady Dick and MJ Rice are our top guys. They have 4 guys that were top 100 recruits altogether coming in. They'll have a lot to replace, but they should still be a force where they have won 16 of the past 23 Big 12 titles. And of course, they've been investigated for allegations of cheating and a number of different things recently, but we're not sure when that's ever going to come through. That's been 2 years pending, but it sure seems like Bill Self will be able to put a number of pieces back together to have Kansas in the Big 12 mix again. My number 6 is UCLA, who's had 68 wins over the past 3 seasons. Legend Johnny Juzang is gone, but Tyler Campbell and Johnny Jacquez are 2 of the top returning scorers in the conference, and they'll be running with Adam Bona and Dylan Andrews and superstar Amani Bailey, 3 of the top recruits in the country. They were top third of the Pac-12 in every major statistical category and should be tracking that way again. And just a number of different young pieces infusing into this hot California scene again. I expect UCLA to be at the top of the Pac-12. Number 7, I have Indiana in a feisty Big Ten conference where it could be very fluid who's on top one week to the next. The Hoosiers returned 4 starters from the number 3 Big Ten defense and bring in 4 top recruits: Jalen Hood-Stefano, Malik Renu, Caleb Banks, and CJ Gunn. The big guy coming back, Trice Jackson-Davis, the 6'9 center, who averaged 18.3 points per game and 8.1 rebounds last season, is one of the top bigs in the conference. As long as he's holding down the middle, some of these young, hot recruits should be able to infuse around him, along with the guys coming back from last year. So Indiana might be the top team in the Big Ten. I have them as my number 7 team right now. My number 8 team is the Baylor Bears out of the Big 12. Baylor lost leading scorer Langston Love, Jonathan Tamaku. I did not say that correctly. They also lost LJ Cryer prior to, now I'm all tongue-tied. Prior to entering the NCAA tournaments, they lost 3 guys, but they still went in as the number 1 seed. The Bears started 15-0 last season and finished 27-7 and 14-4 in conference play, tied for number 1 in the Big 12. All 3 of these guys are going to come back, is the point, whether I can say their names or not. Second team All Big 12 guy, Adam Flagler, and his 13.8 points per game will be back as well. So Scott Drew is bringing in a top 10 point guard, a one-and-done in Kenyon George, to infuse with a number of guys coming back off of injuries that were expected to be big contributors last year, and a top returning player as well. So this team has been ranked in the top 10 since December of 2019, and I don't expect them to fall out of that anytime soon. Number 9 is Duke, because they're Duke, and because Coach K handpicked John Schreier to overtake his position. Of course, he's a rookie head coach, played for Coach K several years back. 7 guys, 7 rookies that they're bringing in, 7 freshmen, including 4 centers, all over 6'10", highlighted by 7'1" Derek Lively, the second, the top big in the country. Transfer Jacob Radson from Illinois, Ryan Young, a 6'10" center from Northwestern, and Kyle Catchings from Harvard are all coming in. Jeremy Roach is the lone returning starter at this point. So you're really just betting on talent and size for this roster and the hope that John Schreier is able to pull things together. But this could be a really super talented young team. Will they be able to put wins together, or will they fall to other experienced, talented teams? That remains to be seen, as it does most years with these super freshman groups. At number 10, I have Arkansas. The Razorbacks lost all 5 starters, but Eric Musselman brought in the number 2 overall recruiting class with 6 freshmen to infuse with a handful of transfers. Watching the squad is going to be like watching Duke or Kentucky this year. A fleet of young guys trying to gel throughout the season, trying to win college games as they warm up for the NBA next year. Anthony Black is a 6'7" guard, and Nick Smith Jr. is 6'5", a lengthy talent. They're both ranked as top prospects at one point. Darren Ford won Gatorade Player of the Year twice. Musselman was 28-9 last season, 13-5. That's good for 4th in the SEC last year. He's coming off of back-to-back Sweet 16 appearances and an Elite 8 last year. Sweet 16 with Nevada several years back. His methods seem to work, and I expect him to be able to gel a number of young, talented prospects into a really fun, really good Arkansas team this year. Number 11 is Creighton, and they're a group of young guys who were all freshmen last season. They're a big deal because 2 of the 3 returning starters were freshmen last year, and a number of them coming off the bench will be young guys as well. Big East Freshman of the Year, Ryan Nummard is one of them. They also return Defensive Big East Player of the Year, 7'1" center Ryan Callenbrenner, who averaged 13.1 points per game to go with 2.6 blocks per game. They have some more good freshmen coming in. Baylor Sheeman is a transfer from South Dakota State who leads the Summit League in rebounding and assists last season, so they should be really good in the Big East. I think they'll win it. I have the number 11. My number 12 team is the Arizona Wildcats, coming off the 33-win season last year. Tommy Lloyd was excellent. He sent 3 guys to the NBA, but 2 starters are back. 6'11" Azealis Tulbis is averaging almost 14 points per game and 6 rebounds last year. Kriza, 9.7 points, 4.7 assists. So those will be great building pieces. The number 25 recruit, Kylan Boswell, is a point guard. He'll be great as well. And they're bringing a number of international prospects, which Lloyd is certainly familiar with recruiting from his Gonzaga days. His teams were 1st in assists, 3rd in scoring, 4th in shooting percentage, 9th in rebounding nationally. So I think that he'll be able to take a number of great players and mold them into another force again this year, even though I have UCLA number 1 in the Pac-12. I think he'll push the right buttons to do some entertaining things again. So my top 12 are North Carolina, Kentucky, Gonzaga, Houston, Kansas, UCLA, Indiana, Baylor, Duke, Arkansas, Creighton, and Arizona. My number 13 is going to be Tennessee. The Vols were 27-9 last year, again second in the SEC. This team has been top 5 in defensive efficiency for several times out of the past few years. They were 12th in assists, 19th in turnover margin, and 25th in scoring margin nationally last year. 4 starters are back. They have a 5-star point prospect in Julian Phillips at 6'8" as the star of that recruiting class. I think Barnes will get them in the mix again, and they are my 3rd SEC team in here so far. Wyoming, I've up here at 14th. That's probably a little crazy, but I think that they'll be a really good team out of the Mountain West Conference. The Cowboys are returning all but one rotation player from the roster that made the NCAA tournament. Jeff Linder is heading into year 3. He grabbed several Pac-12 casts-off out of the transfer portal and should have a loaded team with all the starters back. Graham Ike is 6'9". He's the top scorer and rebounder last year at 19.5 points per game and 9.6 rebounds. Hunter Malgalo averaged 18.5 points and 6.3 assists. This team should be a force in the Mountain West with improvement from last year's group and an infusion of new bodies to give it new dimensions. My number 15 is the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, Ohio State lost basically everyone from last season. Zed Key at almost 8 points and 6 rebounds per game is the only returning starter, but 8 freshmen from a top 10 recruiting class are back. They're almost all top 100 prospects, so it's another young, talented team that should be a top 20 group. Transfer Sean McNeil from West Virginia is a 3-point shooter. Isaac Lakiki from Oklahoma State and Tanner Holden from Wright State are coming in. Holden averaged 20 points and 7 rebounds per game for Wright State. This was a top 20, top 15 offense in the country last season, so it's possible Chris Holdman can put together another power lineup with young, talented guys. My number 16 is another Big Ten group, and that's the Purdue Boilermakers. Now, Purdue loses a lot, including Jaden Ivey and one of the twin center powers and Travion Williams. Zach Edey at 7'4" is back. He averaged over 14 points and 7 rebounds per game last year. And maybe 7'2" Will Berg from Sweden will join them, the young freshman there. Now, Matt Painter has had a top offense for several years. 15th nationally last season, 2nd in rebounds, 7th in shooting, 7th in three-point percentage, 13th in assists. This team is going to be big and tall, could be shoddy on defense again, but the offense may drop a little bit, and maybe the incoming freshmen will vacate some spots and be able to improve on the defensive end. The guard positions seem like they'll be a little thin and not have as much experience, so that could be a little questionable. That's a very important position to have a table setter and a good point guard at the college level. That's why I have them down a few spots, but I still think they'll be successful this season. Purdue is my 16 team. My number 17 team is Miami, who made their first Elite Eight in school history last year. They have 2 starters, highlighted by Isaiah Wong returning. At the point, he has averaged 15 and 4 rebounds, and he's one of the best guys at that position in the country. Jim Larinaga, the coach there, pulled in a top transfer, Najil Pack, a shooter from Kansas State, to help the cause there. 5 freshmen were pulled in as well from a good class. Miami is doing well. The coach there is good. They were 5th in steals, 31st nationally in shooting percentage, 4th in the ACC in free throw shooting there, 4th in the ACC in scoring. They aren't very big, which could cause problems, but they have a few good players there, good coaching staff. Seems like they'll be a solid team in the ACC there, although they do have to compete, of course, with Duke and North Carolina. Number 18 team is finally the Villanova Wildcats, who had 30 wins last season. Jay Wright's retiring was shocking, but Kyle Neptune is stepping into his shoes after a year away from the program as a first-year head coach at Fordham, where he was 16-16 last year. He won't start over here with the bare cupboard. 2 starters return, including Justin Moore, who had tore his ACL last season and couldn't finish up the year, but he had 14.8 points per game and 4.8 rebounds per game before he went down. Cameron Whitmore is a probable one-and-done highlight on the freshman class there. This team should have a lot of good talent. They're number 1 in free throw percentage in the country, set 23rd in scoring defense. They have a good 3-point shooting group there. Excellent turnover margin. If Neptune follows the same steps, it should be a really good Big East team. Number 19 for me is TCU. They were 21-13 last season. They were tied for 5th in the Big 12. They had a losing record. So this is kind of my first team off the beaten path here. Mike Miles Jr. decided to pass on the NBA and return to Fort Worth under Jamie Dixon here. He averaged 15.4 points per game, 3.8 assists per game, and his coming back means all 5 starters and key players except for one will be back next year. This team had the number 4 best rebounding margin nationally and a decent scoring defense, but having everyone back in what was a competitive team in the Big 12 here seems like they'll be able to continue to build with a true NBA possible starter, star in the lineup there, and I expect them to be a good rebounding and defensive group moving forward in the Big 12 for this upcoming season. At number 20, I'm putting the damn Ducks of Oregon on the list and hoping they aren't falling through. Again, 20-15 last season, they bottomed out. They were 506 games into the year. 3 starters return, and Will Richardson, who averaged 14 points and almost 4 assists per game last year, should be the star and focal point. Several other guys have logged a number of minutes due to rotational changes last year. 7-footer Nate Biddle is a former 5-star recruit, and he should see more time. Kel-El Ware is a current 7-foot recruit as part of this class and should be a one-and-done and should see time. Kel-El, I wonder if that's referral to Superman's real name. Tyrone Williams is transferring in, shot 50% from the field, and scored 27.7 points per game as the top junior college level transfer guy available in the portal. He led the country in scoring at that level last year. This is going to be a big team. Hopefully, it'll be a good team too. At 21, I have Texas A&M, who won the NIT last season. They were 5th in the SEC, 27-13 overall. They had the number 1 turnover margin in the SEC, 15th in the country, which is really something. They don't turn the ball over. They had the number 3 scoring defense, 5th in 3-point percentage in the SEC. They were 3rd in steal percentage, 30th in adjusted defensive efficiency. This should be a really good team. They should be able to replicate those because 4 starters are back. So hopefully they're able to do a number of great things, take care of the ball, play good defense, score a little bit. Should hopefully be a good team in the SEC. Number 22 is Texas. Tommy Allen, the 6'6 wing, is back. 12 points, 6.4 rebounds per game. Marcus Carr, the guard, 11.4 points. Christian Bishop, the 6'7 wing, 7 points, 5.6 rebounds, are all big contributors for Chris Beard's second season. He's got a big recruiting class with 5 new big guys. So it's not going to be a huge roster. It's actually going to be rather small. But you should have nice group of young talent infused with talent returning from last year's squad. At 23, I put Dayton, taking a gamble on the winner of the Atlantic 10 Conference. That's always competitive, but you're never sure who's actually going to come away with the title there and finish in the top 25. St. Bonaventure was the popular pick last season, and they did not end up being the best team over there. Dayton has 3 starters back from a team that was top 20 in scoring defense, shooting percentage, and top 30 in rebounding margin. Again, I think that they'll be a really good defensive group that'll be able to shoot pretty well as well. But I have St. Louis in my overall rankings. I was looking at them as well. I think this is going to be a good Dayton team, though. I'll put them in my number 23 spot. My number 24 team is going to be the Michigan State Spartans, leaning on Tom Izzo to put a good team together here last year. They were 23-13 and tied for 7th in the Big Ten, which still gave them a winning record. Now, he's only returning a couple of starters here, but the group was 18th nationally in three-point percentage, which is extremely impressive. He was also had a decent rebounding team and free throw shooting team again last year as his calling cards. And he brought in a couple more top recruits, which we don't always expect, but we should hopefully see infused here. Chuan Holloman, a top 75 guy who can contribute. Carson Cooper will hopefully bring something in as well. Jackson Kohler is getting some hype, a 6'9", 250 guy, Zach Randolph comparison. So we'll see what he's able to do in infusing a few new pieces in and bringing them into his system there. I just kind of like them over some of the other Big Ten teams there, Illinois, Michigan, Rutgers, trusting Izzo to kind of pull the pieces together there. And finally, my 25th team is Virginia. They were 21-14 last year and had their struggles. 6th in the ACC at 12-8 in conference play, but still a rough ball club. 6th in scoring defense last season. It took a while to get going. Jaden Garner at 15 points, 6.4 rebounds per game was a key player for the squad that returns all 5 starters. Callie Clark is the lone 2019 player from the championship roster, but I think that they'll get the defense together and win a few more ball games than they did last year. The rest of the teams I was looking at and essentially rounding out my top 40, San Diego State, USC, Michigan, St. Mary's, St. Louis, Alabama, Xavier, Notre Dame, Auburn, UConn, Florida State, Providence, Iowa, Texas Tech, and Washington State. So again, my top 25, North Carolina, Kentucky, Gonzaga. I think those three have the best chance to win the national championship, pretty even. Then I have Houston, Kansas, UCLA, Indiana, Baylor, Duke, Arkansas, rounding out my top 10, followed by Creighton, Arizona, Tennessee, Wyoming, Ohio State, Purdue, Miami, Villanova, TCU, Oregon, Texas A&M, Texas State, and Michigan State, and Virginia for my top 25 preseason for the college basketball season 2022-23. All right, and finally, my top 10 teams that are the best TV watches. And I have an honorable mention first. That is actually Gonzaga. The non-conference slate for them sets up with Washington, Alabama, Michigan State, Texas, Kentucky, Baylor. Now the round-robin conference slate sees BYU, St. Mary's, San Francisco. But the truth is they just aren't particularly challenged by any of those teams. They do lose a game or two here and there. They do sometimes lose in the conference tournament at the end of the year, but they routinely beat up on these teams. So for the last 20 games of the season, it's not always particularly challenging to them. But Drew Timme is back. They have a number of great pieces, some freshmen as well, and this will be a really talented ball club to flip on for a game to see what's going on, in particularly the first couple months of the year. So take an opportunity to watch some of their big games while they're early in the season. Now, number 10 on my list is Arkansas, the Razorbacks. Eric Musselman having great success there. Flip them on. The bottom half of the SEC may not be as interesting this year, but pretty much every game with this young group he's going to have with top recruits should be good to see where these guys measure against the competition, particularly as they get going early. The non-conference is Louisville, UNC Greensboro, Oklahoma, not very good teams. Baylor's the only good one in there, so the non-conference slate isn't particularly interesting. They do have Kentucky twice and Texas A&M twice on the conference slate. That's why I rank them so low, but there's going to be a lot of talent here. Should be interesting once they're able to get things going, and they have an opportunity to win the SEC. Eric Musselman, a very good coach there, and he'll have a team full of future NBAers. Number 9 on my list is Ohio State, also bringing in a number of fresh, talented faces there as well. Their non-conference slate, San Diego State, Duke, and North Carolina, as they're reloading their post-E.J. Liddell for that young group. They get Michigan State, Purdue, Iowa, Illinois twice on that loaded Big Ten slate, so they'll always be playing someone good. Check out that nice young Ohio State crew reloading after not having a lot of expectations for several years now. They should have a great young group there. Number 8 is this North Carolina team trying to really win another national championship for Hubert Davis. It's his first, but a team that, in my mind, is going to win a national championship here. Again, great talent. They focused very much on their core 5 guys last year, 4 of which are back. The non-conference slate is Indiana, Virginia Tech, Ohio State, Michigan. They're challenging themselves there. The ACC, they do get Duke, Virginia, Notre Dame twice, so they'll get some of the tougher opponents there multiple times. But the North Carolina Tar Heels are Manna Bayakak going for a second ACC Player of the Year award. Great group there. Check out the North Carolina Tar Heels. Number 7 is Baylor, the Bears, who haven't been out of the top 10 in a very long time. A couple of guys returning from injuries, a couple of great recruits there, always playing good basketball. Big 10 is always a competitive, Big 12 is always a competitive conference. Little bit lighter slate, Washington State, Marquette, Virginia will be good, Gonzaga certainly in the non-conference. All the Texas schools, and Kansas twice in the round robin Big 12 slate. Check out the Baylor Bears, who are always winning, always have great talent, are getting top prospects in there. Scott Drew, a top coach in the profession. Number 6 team is maybe a surprise, but it is Creighton. The Blue Jays, a non-Power 5 team, but a Power 6 team in the Big East there. A lot of young potential NFL talent. They've got some shooters and just guys who've had logged a number of minutes thanks to what they've gone through last year and getting guys on the court. The non-conference is Arizona State, Nebraska, BYU, Texas, Texas Tech, all in a row from late November into December. So you'll be able to turn them on your TV, see how they're doing after a few warm-up games. The round robin in the Big East is interesting. It's actually 11 teams. So you're playing 10 other squads each twice. So it's 20 games in the conference play. So they'll get Villanova, Xavier, Providence, UConn, Marquette twice. Seton Hall and St. John's may be decent too. So they'll have a great slate in order to see how that team pans out. My number 5 team is the Arizona Wildcats. Can Tommy Tuberville just put together another great squad here after shockingly doing what he did last year in the Pac-12, taking over his first job as a head coach? Just stunning, high up tempo, putting guys together that just weren't expected to do anything in the major picture or in the Pac-12 at all. Can you gather a number of pieces? And again, transfers, freshmen, can he do it again? Arizona's non-conference schedule is a little bit light. The schedule in general is a little bit light. The non-conference is Indiana, Cincinnati, Tennessee. They do get UCLA, USC, Oregon twice in conference play. But this could be one of the most exciting teams to watch when they really get going and shooting the ball. This was the best kept secret for the first couple months, tucked away on the West Coast there at the beginning of last college basketball season. My number 4 watch is Texas, going back to the Big 12 there. Again, the round robin slate. They get Kansas twice, Baylor twice, TCU twice, Texas twice. They have 2 great players returning from last season. They've got more top recruits coming in. Can Beard be successful in the second season there? I think he will be. A lot of great talent. A couple leading scorers coming back. The non-conference still is Creighton, Illinois, Gonzaga, Tennessee. That is not easy. Texas Tech, my number 4 TV watch team this upcoming season. Maybe this isn't as surprising, but my number 3 is Duke. How will John Schreier do there? Will we see any glimpses of Coach K on the sidelines? Who knows? And this is largely an unknown on performance because you're just bringing in a fleet of new 5-star prospects, the top recruiting class in the country. And again, you have like a handful of guys that'll be over 6'10", a lot of bigs, a lot of length, and we'll see what they can do with a new coach and a whole bunch of new bodies all the way around. My number 3, the Duke Blue Devils. Kansas, Ohio State, Iowa are notable non-conference games. They'll get North Carolina, Miami, and Virginia Tech twice on the conference slate. My number 2 TV watch team is Indiana. Trice Jackson Davis at 18 points and 8 rebounds a game last year was a stud, and he'll be back with a number of top prospects for the Indiana Hoosiers. The non-conference slate is Xavier, North Carolina, Arizona, Kansas. That is loaded. They get Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Illinois, Iowa twice. No wonder this was a play-in team for the tournament last year. It'll be another brutal schedule this year, but they'll have a lot more talent on the roster in a great Big Ten conference and an opportunity to win it. My number one top TV watch team for this upcoming season is the Kentucky Wildcats. Oscar Tshiebwe is back, and everyone complains that it's all freshmen here at Kentucky, and there will be plenty of great talent there as well, but he is a senior. There's a couple other seniors that will probably be starting. He could win Player of the Year again. He could finally grab 20 rebounds for an average per season, which is what he wanted last year, and he is again, by all metrics, the best returning college player that we've probably had since Ralph Sampson back in his Virginia days in the 80s. So my number one TV watch team is the Kentucky Wildcats that you all despise. Again, my countdown: Arkansas 10, Ohio State 9, North Carolina 8, Baylor 7, Creighton 6, Arizona 5, Texas 4, Duke 3, Indiana 2, Kentucky 1, and Gonzaga an honorable mention. Thank you very much for tuning in. We've got a couple weeks here until the college basketball season officially tips off, but I'm excited for that as well as the back half of the college football season. I'm so excited when those two can finally collide, and I just have wall-to-wall televisions to keep track of all the awesome games. So let me know what you think. Send me a few messages. I want to know your top teams, which ones you're excited to see perform, and let me know what you think. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny. Daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beater turn into a Bentley. See, I'm stunning something, all I'm thinking, please don't tell me. Oh boy, she was seeing